At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and as always, a big shout-out to Facebook subscribers as well as patrons of the podcast. Thank you for everything, and there is a lot going on, man. A lot. We've got a bunch of just amazing, powerful episodes that are coming up for all of you, and we are super, super close to 2 million worldwide downloads. It's crazy. I can't even. It's hard to think sometimes that when I started this, I had no idea that this was going to happen. I mean, we're not only on the 10-year anniversary, we're about to hit 2 million downloads. It's heard in over 60 countries, and I thank all of you for that, the continued support, but especially all of you who have come on and trusted me with sharing your stories. Things are building up more with the audience on all social media platforms, especially on Instagram right now. I have I Am 911 Stories. That's part of Instagram. I've been recording some of these stories that have been sent in, just me reading them, whether it be me on camera or the image, the meme that the story is a part of, and then reading it and having it out as a excuse me, as a voiceover. And people are just sharing and sharing and sharing. So thank you so very much for not only viewing those stories, but also writing them and emailing them in. So thank you for all of that. Again, none of this would be what it is if it wasn't for all of you. So I thank you for the job that you do. We've got a bunch of bonus content that's also coming up for Facebook subscribers and patrons of the podcast, whether it be audio versions of the DRT or open mic. But we also, or I also have some new Singing Badly in My Car videos that are going to be coming up. What I'm trying to do is get all of the ones that I had for patrons already and put them out to the Facebook subscribers first. And then once I catch up with all of those, then the new ones will come out for all subscribers of the podcast. So excited for that. If you have any songs that you would like to see me sing badly to, oh man, I probably shouldn't have said that, because now it's going to be some crazy shit that comes out. But it's okay. It's all supposed to be funny, and I'm all about it. So thank you for everything. I am super excited today for my guest, and we're just going to go ahead and jump right in. My guest today is Elizabeth Mills, and she is a telecommunications officer with Hendricks County out of Indiana. Hello.
Hi, Ricardo.
Hello. I am super happy to have you on, and I don't know if you've seen any of those Singing Badly in My Car videos, but Those are a lot of fun.
I have not, but I have a list of things to watch later with my niece and nephew, who I'm sure will love them as well.
All right. Yeah, there you go. There's one that I've been working on. I have to so I've had the teaser out there for a little bit now, and I just need to complete it, but it's the song "Let It Go"
My niece would
from
love it.
Frozen, and in the teaser, I start singing it, and I stop, and I say something like, "You know, something is missing," and I snap my fingers, and I edited it so that my daughters appear in the car with me.
That's perfect.
So
That is perfect.
I need to I have to finish it so that they're in there with me, and I've got all the different cameras. It's basically my version of carpool karaoke, but it's just me singing badly in my car, hence
Which I'm sure is
the
better
title.
than carpool karaoke.
Dude, it is pretty funny, but also, like, I'll be listening to the most, I don't know, songs that I probably wouldn't usually listen to.
Mhm.
For example, my one of my sisters, my younger, I have younger twin sisters, and one of them, Crystal, is just in love with BTS, and their song Dynamite, when it came out, um, I listened to that damn song for like a week straight. I was
Mhm.
listening to it and reading the lyrics at the same time, and then just listening and listening and listening until I felt comfortable enough, because when you're doing that, I mean, I wanna be able to sing it and do, whatever else I'm doing without, I mean, I'm already looking like a nerd as it is, but I wanna look like a confident nerd.
I get it.
Right?
That's me on a great day after work. I've got the 90s station blaring in my car, windows down, and I'm just rolling through town waiting for someone to pull me over.
That's yeah, so there you go, yeah, so you get it, that's
I
basically
get
how
it.
it is, and, it was a lot of fun. I ended up recording another version of it with my sister Crystal in there and our mom sitting in back, and it was freaking hilarious. It was such a good time. So, for those watching, more Singing Badly in My Car is coming up, but again, I'm super happy to have you on, and, so you've been in public safety, like, you've been doing this, like, kinda going on 14 years now, right?
Yes, it'll be 14 years this year, and it's been an amazing whirlwind of a journey.
Yeah, well,
That's
the way we were talking, like, in the beginning, I I said, "It goes by fast," right?
some days, yes, most days not so much.
Right, because there's a lot of those times too, and I'm sure it's the same way in any profession, but in 911, when you're getting hammered by calls back to back to back to back to
Mhm.
back, it feels sometimes like, "Man, we have to be halfway through the shift now, and it's only been, like, 10 minutes."
Yes. We were just discussing that the other night on shift because it was one of those, like, there's like a sweet spot where time goes at a normal rate, where, like, if you're too slow, time drags. If things are just busy enough, you're kind of right on time. And then if things are way too busy, you look at the clock and be like, I swear it should be 3 a.m., but it's only 9 p.m.
Yes.
Something's not right here.
Right. Yeah, like, something is completely off, I don't understand what's going on, but when there are those moments that, like, sometimes it's opposite where you've only had a few big calls,
Hmm.
and it feels like time is just dragging, but then you look up and it's been 4 hours already, and you're like, "Oh, it's actually going by fast." Like, "Okay, I'm
Yeah.
down with that, I'm good with that."
I'm the person on shift that I'm like, it's only 2 a.m. And we have a coworker who's currently on leave right now, and I miss her so much because she's the one, she'll be like, hey guys, it's already 2 a.m. And I love her personality because she's so positive about things.
Mhm.
And even while she's off on medical leave, she's like randomly sending us text messages. Hey guys, it's already 3 a.m. And I'm like, go back to sleep. You're you're home. Go to bed.
Right.
But it definitely like helps us to kind of keep the night going and
Yeah.
just kind of like, hey guys, time is passing. Like, we've got this. Let's keep going. And I just love her amazing personality. So I'm ready for her to come back to work, but it's going to be like another month. So
Oh, man.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, how did you how did you get started to begin with? I mean, again, you're going on 14 years, so let's go back in time. Do you come from a public safety family, or do you just
No.
kinda Went right in.
I fell into this. I was actually working for a rental car company when the travel bubble popped back in 2008, 2009, and I was let go because they were just kind of downsizing, and they were just like, "Hey, you're kind of the last one we're letting go. We're sorry, we're gonna miss you, but bye."
Oh
So
man.
I was going to start filing for unemployment, and my sister came to me. She's like, "Hey, my friend who works for the sheriff's department in the city says that they're hiring dispatchers." I was like, "I don't want to be a dispatcher." I was like, "Who wants to do that?"
Yeah.
But I did, like, I knew it was a requisite to file for unemployment. You have to prove that you're like looking for work.
Oh,
So
very true. Yeah.
I was like, "I'll apply. Like, what's the worst that could happen?" They tell me no, and I'm like, "Okay, whatever." So I went down to the sheriff's department. I put in an application. I took a typing test, and I got a letter telling me I was on to the next round. And I was like, "No." And it was just like that every round. It was like, "Okay, you've moved on to the next round. Here's the date and time for the test that you're gonna have to take." It was like 6 hours that you have to go and study on site and take the test there. And I was like, "There's no way I'm passing this test because I'm horrible with my directions. I can't spell for anything." My coworkers will agree with this. But it was just like, you have to take this test on all like basics. And I was like, "There's no way I'm going to pass this test." Sure enough, I got the letter, "Hey, you've passed to the next round." And I'm like, these people are on crack, but we're going to go with it. And 6 months down the road, I had been hired back at the rental car company, and I received a phone call from the sheriff's department. They're like, "Hey, so you kind of slipped through the cracks. You were supposed to start on Monday." I was like, "Okay." They're like, "You and 2 other people from this class weren't notified. So we're going to need you to come like start immediately." And I went to the rental car company and I was like, "Here's my resignation. Like, no notice. I'm out."
Deuces.
And they were just like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Yeah. Kind of, you did the same thing to me previously. Sorry." So
For
I was
sure.
just like, I have an opportunity here, and it's one that I wasn't planning on, but I can't turn it down. Like, I feel like there's like a reason that this has all worked out. So I started the class, kind of caught up quickly, and a couple months later hit the floor. It was the biggest whirlwind I could imagine. I never expected to make it through the process.
Holy
Never.
hell. Okay, let's back up a little bit. Let's look at that process really quick. So, what did all of that involve? Like, what you said that there was a big test and everything that you had to take. Were there other tests?
Yeah.
And the reason I ask is because every center has, a different process. There's different
Right.
testing, whether it be a typing test or,
Mhm.
a hearing test. If you can hear the traffic, you get to move on. If you can't, see ya. So, what was some of
So
that you did?
the agency that I applied with, before they would even take my application in hand, I had to pass a typing test. I was like, "Okay." So like I sat down at a computer, I typed it out, and they took my application, said, "Okay, we'll let you know." The next step was the written exam. And it's one of those, like, they sent us to the state police post, and like it was an auditorium full of people who had applied, and you literally sat there and took a written test of like, you're listening to radio traffic, like putting things in the order, or what was the third item mentioned, what's the correct spelling of Doberman, or mapping. It was all on this written test.
Holy shit.
I thought for sure, because they gave you like 3 hours to study and then like 3 hours to take the test, because you couldn't take the material home with you.
Oh my god, it
So
was a 3-hour test?
it was a 3 hour test, because it was like you have to sit there and there's recordings that you're listening to.
Yeah.
So everybody's on the same page. It's not like anyone can be done early. So I thought for sure I failed that part. And then I was notified, "Okay, you're on to the next round," which is the vision and hearing and psych evaluation. So they kind of did all three of those in the same, because they were in the same building at that time. And from there, it was the board interview with like all the big wigs. And
Holy.
I was so nervous because I don't have a background in any of this. I didn't really plan to, do this job. What do I say?
Right.
And it just literally was one of those back to back to back moments where you kept getting the letter, and I was just waiting for one of them to be like, sorry, you didn't make it. And each time I got the, hey, you're on to the next round, I was like, is this real life? Like, is this really happening to me?
Oh, man. See, and what's crazy too about the, like, those panel interviews, especially in this line of work, you don't think about it at the time until you kinda reflect on it or whichever. A lot of that too is kind of to see if you can handle the pressure,
Mm-hmm.
of the amount of questions that are gonna be coming at you that entire time. I had a panel interview once. I was going for 2 different centers at the same time, and I ended up getting the one that I wanted, which was actually the county that I grew up in. Because I mean, I know the area and stuff like that, so it was really good. But the other one, it was a 6-person panel that I was sitting with. So it's me on one side, and then everybody
Yep.
on the other side. And like you said, the big wigs, like, oh, you've got the county administrator, the lieutenants or whatever, all lined up. One person asks a question, however, each one of those people are building on those questions, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
"Okay." But and you just go and go and go, and it's
Yeah.
that pressure. Can you handle it?
And I really didn't think I did. I was just like, I walked out of there and I was like, there's no way I passed that. None at all.
Oh,
But again,
man.
I didn't have a background in
Mhm.
law enforcement or public safety. So it's like I didn't really know what I was saying at the time. I was like, how do I answer these questions? Because I've never really thought about what this job entails.
Mhm.
It's because again, I just applied to apply. So I wasn't really
Yeah.
thinking about, hey, this is what you're getting yourself in for. So that was like I think my biggest hurdle there was getting through that. And even to this day, I still question why I'm in dispatch.
You know, I so I remember one of the questions that really got me was, when I very, very first started dispatching, and this is in Central Florida. I had, excuse me, I had gone to visit my mom, my grandmother, and my younger sisters. My younger brother and I went over there. We were only gonna be there for, like, 2 weeks, and, because for me too, I was just trying to figure out what else I was gonna do with my life. I had just graduated, I had some issues going on with my baby's mama, and and I was like, we're just gonna go and visit, mom and them and just whatever. Well, it ended up turning into a 3.5-year stay. I stayed there, and it's where I started out my dispatching career, and
Hmm.
I remember going in for the interview, and I went through all of the stuff. It was the chief on one side, and then the lieutenant sitting next to him, and they're firing questions, and I'm answering and answering and answering. I'm like, yeah, I'm badass. I'm keeping up with them and everything. And then the chief goes, "Okay, I've got one last question for you." And I said, "Okay, what's up? What kind of skeletons do you have in your closet?" And I said, "What?" And I had never been asked that question before, anything like that, and I said, "I don't know what you mean," and he goes, "Yeah, you do." He's like, "Come on, everyone has skeletons in their closet. What skeletons do you have in yours? Because we're gonna find out." And I was
Uh-huh.
like, and I said, "Well, I stole a car once," and we all started laughing and stuff, and then he looks back and he goes, "No, really?" And I went, "No, really, I did." And he goes, "What?"
Be
So
like,
I
did you
had to
really just admit to that?
yeah, so I had to explain to him though that it was a civil situation, and it was my own car that I ended up getting back. And they're like, "Oh, oh, okay." And so we had a good laugh and stuff, but I didn't hear from them for 2 months. So I thought I, like, screwed myself by telling this story, trying to be funny or whatever, and then out of nowhere, he shows up at my house and, asks me if I still want the job, and I said, "Yeah," and I said, I thought I screwed myself with that story." He's like, "No, that was ballsy, but, we like you." We the reason it took long was because the background process is long, but I
Yeah.
started that night. That night,
Wow.
yeah, that he spoke to me, I started that night. It was midnight shift. Observed my trainer take one 911 call, and then it was my turn. He's like, "Alright, you're next." I was like, "Hell no." It's like, "There's nothing else to this?"
No.
It
I
was
had,
it was
like,
nuts.
a 6 weeks long, like, classroom training before I hit the floor, and I am so thankful for that, because when I hit the floor, it was a whole different experience.
Oh, man. Tell
Whole
me about
different
it. Like, how
experience.
did so let's did before we get to that part, did you get to do, like, a sit-along or anything like that?
I mean, I had kinda seen when
Mhm.
I went for the interview, just kind of, like, looking through the window to kinda see what goes on there, but I did not sit in, I did not listen to any calls. I kind of wish I had. I feel like things may have turned out different if I had. But I'm glad that I didn't as well because
Mhm.
I feel like I'm on the correct path. So I didn't do a sit-in until I came to the agency that I'm currently at. I was offered a sit-in to, "Hey, see if this is a good fit for you." And then all of a sudden the night before, they're like, "Hey, while you're here, we're just gonna do critical in your interview." And I was just like, "I haven't even decided I'm leaving my current agency, but okay. All right then."
Oh, man. So, let's look back on that first day when you walked in.
Mhm,
Was it overwhelming at all? And the reason I ask is because when I ended up, moving back home to Southwest Michigan, where I finished off my dispatching career, that first night walking in, I remember seeing everyone there because at the police department, it
mhm,
was just me. It was me
mhm,
for 8 hours, and that was it. But when I moved back, back home, there was 3 to 4 people on at a time. So for a central dispatch, it was different for me, and it was overwhelming. Walking in, seeing someone with, like, 4 monitors
mhm.
and talking on the radio, taking a phone call, typing, yelling over to somebody else what is going on, and eating at the same time. And I thought,
Yes.
"How the hell am I gonna do this?" So for you, do you remember walking in there that first time and just, like, how you felt?
I remember, just kind of an overwhelming because even the classroom training, like, we didn't have nearly the amount of monitors that we had on the floor.
Mhm.
So it was just kind of like everything doubled at the desk that you're actually sitting at. The room is so much louder, so much more chaotic. I was in stimulation overload, and I was on a shift of people that I was sure hated me because it was the grumpy day shift. I will tell you, I will say for anybody that is watching, I loved the people that I worked with because in the end, they got me through a lot of bad stuff.
Mhm.
But when I walked in there, I was so overwhelmed and I was ready to cry because I was just like, I don't know that I can do this.
Mhm.
And I sat down with my trainer, who I had thankfully met during the classroom training portion. And that kind of helped a little bit because I think she had seen me in the classroom. She kind of knew a little bit of my style. We sat down and she was like, "Okay, we're going to get this done." And I was like, "If you say so." And it just went from there.
That's awesome. That it's I love that because there are some places out there where you might not have that type of support, right? You might not
Mhm.
have someone who's like, "Let's do this. We're gonna do this." Or it might take a little bit to get to that point, which kinda sucks too, 'cause and the reason I say that is because when I went to that central dispatch, there were 4 phases of the training.
Mhm.
And that 4th one was the shadow one where the trainer's, off doing their own thing. They're still listening, but you're working with everyone else. But when you first get in
Right.
there, it's just you and your trainer, and you've got, the umbilical cord and everything on while you're
Yep.
listening to calls or whichever. The problem, though, for me at least, was when I was told how everything works there, that we're a team, we're a family,
Mhm.
that's what I expected right off the bat. So I walk in and no one is like talking to me.
Mhm.
And I think, okay, do I have this wrong? It got to the point where I remember coming home from a shift and telling my wife, I don't know if I want to do this after all. And she goes, why? And I started explaining. I said, we're supposed to be a team, but no one is talking to me. I feel
Mhm.
like I do not belong here for one. And two, like, people don't want me here. Like they're not
Mhm.
going to talk to me unless I've earned it or whichever. And I kind
You've
of feel
proven
like,
yourself.
right, and which I get, which I understand. However, you can still kinda say hi, or you can still talk to
Right.
me. You can still make me feel like you also want me there, because if you're doing a lot of overtime and you don't want all that overtime, don't you wanna treat me a certain way so that I'll stay? So
Right.
that was one of the things I was struggling with, and one of my coworkers there was actually a girl that I grew up with, went to school with, and she graduated high school a year before me. And it was just interesting that years later we end up working together in 911 dispatch. But I pulled her aside one night and I said, "Hey, I don't know what's going on here." I said, "But I think I'm gonna bounce. I don't know that I'm gonna do this." And she goes, "No, no, 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 no. It's just the way they do it here. Just hold on, because it'll change." So I did, and, but that was one of those issues, man. It was hard coming in there
Yeah.
and not having that camaraderie, not feeling that from people, and it's completely different there now. They've changed it completely. I think it was
Mhm.
after me that they changed things, because I actually said something to people. It's like,
Yeah.
"You guys should want me to stay, and I don't feel like you want me to stay."
It
So
was
things ended up changing.
It's very much one of those, like, I feel like the dispatch center, it's almost like you have to prove that you're gonna stick around because the
Yeah,
turnover rate is so high in the career
right.
that they're so used to people coming in and not making it through the training or not making it past, far past the training. And that was one of the things that I noticed is that, especially through my time at my old agency, they didn't learn people's names until they'd been there for the minimum of a year. They're just like, "Hey, you."
Ah.
And I'm one of those people, I don't know if you can tell, I'm kinda chatty. Um,
No,
so
really?
I would take my break and go over to the other side of the room, which was the control side,
Mhm.
where they kinda handled the radio traffic side of it, and I'd interject myself into conversations, and I'd be like, "Hi, I'm Liz." Uh, and I ended up building some really good friendships, and one of the women that worked over there, um I will say she was one of the toughest people to get on the good side of because she worked the busiest district, one of the worst districts in the city. And she was just like, I don't want anything to do with you if you're not going to be around long. But she ended up taking me under her wing, taught me a lot. And if I screwed up, I would just hear random over the intercom in the room be like, shins. And she'd be like, I'm going to break your shins if you get on my channel one more time. And I love her for it. I still talk to her to this day. I love her to death. She's one of the best people I've ever met because she did. She taught me a lot about the career. And it's one of my favorite stories is I would just sit there and I would hear shins or fingers. And if it was a bad day, I'd get both.
Oh,
She's
that's
one of my
amazing.
best friends now, and I remember she took me aside years after I started, and she was like, "I remember going home and telling my mother about this new girl that had started at dispatch." And she is like, "My mom even reminded me the other day about how I referred to you as throwing a piglet in a piranha tank because you were so green and so naive."
Oh,
And I was
man.
like, "I don't know that that's a compliment."
Right,
Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, I just like, okay. I mean, things have definitely changed since then. And she's even told me, she's like, you've grown up so much since then. You've grown up so much in the years that you've been a dispatcher.
That is amazing, but, I can fully understand that as well, because there are 2 different ways, right? There's always the
Mhm,
good and the bad, and that way, when it's done with, like, humor and everything, and
mhm,
you're still welcoming, like, people can be, off, I guess, or jerky or whatever, but
yeah,
there's also a way to be jerky, but also with some humor, because that's the way
Yes.
some people are. And so I when I was done with training, the first group of folks that I worked with, they were the ladies who had been there the longest, and
Hmm.
they were all one team. And I remember sitting on the other side thinking, "Oh my god, like, I need to make sure that everything that I do is precision, just awesome, because these ladies have been here for years and years and years, and
Hmm.
I'm just starting." So I would listen, when they would tell me stuff, but I remember one of them, she would see me writing stuff down sometimes, and I remember she walked over and she had a ruler, and she snapped not my hand, but the console, and she would go, "Every time I see you writing, I'm gonna come over here. I might snag you with the ruler." And and she would
Yes.
start laughing, but I knew what she was doing, because, it takes longer. If you're
Hmm.
writing stuff down or whatever, you just type. You just type, 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 type. And some stuff I would still write down every so often if it was like a time, or number or
Right.
whatever, the EMS or something that was going on. But that to me was funny. That's what I mean, that people can be firm, but
Yes.
she was serious, but she was being funny about it. She wasn't being a dick. Is what I'm getting
Absolutely.
at.
So my trainer, when we first started, when we were in the classroom phase, one of the things that they did to teach us code types, because there's
Mhm.
so many code types on that in that agency, they're like, we're gonna do kind of index cards and bring in a photo album. We're gonna like put these all together. And by the end of my training, my trainer was just like, if I see you reach for that book, I'm gonna throw it. And the thing is, like, I love my trainer. I We recently started working together again. She just recently came to the current agency, and we were talking last night about training. And she was like, I noticed that if you messed up, first of all, you were the one that called yourself on it. I never had to call you on it. Second of all, you beat yourself up for it enough that I didn't need to beat you up for it.
Yeah.
And she would make a face at me in the beginning. If I screwed something up, she'd kind of make this like, are you serious look? And it got to the point she was tired of doing it. So she found a picture of a sea turtle and made it her background on the computer where she was doing my daily observations. And she would just lower the observation and be like, just look at the turtle. And we were talking about it last night at work because she's on my shift right now. And she was like, I thought you could take it better from the turtle than from me. And I was like, I love it though, because that's one of the things I will always remember,
Yeah.
because it was lightening the mood and she knew that I needed it. And I would like sit there and kind of try and brush things off. And she was like, I remember you used to do like this thing with your shoulders. Like you're trying to kind of like, lighten the mood by doing that. I looked at her, I was like, no, I was trying to loosen the tension in my shoulders because I was so tense. And she was like, is that really what you were doing? I was like, yeah. She was like, I thought you were just trying to lighten the mood by just doing this like little, I was like, no, that's not the case.
Oh, man. See,
13 years later.
that's those are the best things, right? Especially about this job, because there's so much bad in this job that it's always good to think about those good things.
Yeah.
And there are good things. It's not all bad. It's just like with, the I am 911 movement. A lot of those stories are really hard but powerful stories, but there are also saves that people share. And those are the ones that are in there, but also, going back to, to dispatch and everything, when you're working, let's just say, for example, when you're taking a bunch of hard calls back to back, it I don't know if it's been like this for you as well, but for me, it seemed like the universe, the dispatch universe or whatever, knew that I needed some off the wall call. So in the middle of those crazy hard calls that I had back to back, someone would call in and say, "You need to call this number. You need to call this number right now because something crazy is going to happen to so and so." And this one specifically, this guy just kept calling over and over, but what ended up happening is I ended up calling the phone number. I said to my supervisor, because I wasn't a supervisor at the time, but I said to mine, I said, "I think I'm gonna call this phone number," and she goes, "Don't do it." I was like, "No, I'm gonna do it."
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna push the
Yeah,
button.
and what the guy was talking about, I think it was like the president or something, that something was gonna happen to the president, so I needed to make this phone call, excuse me, and warn them. I call the phone number, and I hear, "White House switchboard." I was like, "Hell no." I said, "I'm sorry, can you say that again?" And the lady goes, "This is the White House switchboard. How can I help you?" And I said, "Oh my god." I said, "Okay, my name is Ricardo. I'm with Allegan County Central Dispatch." And then I was explaining what happened, and she goes, "Oh, so and so? It's he's harmless. We've checked him out." I was like, "Okay." But
You're
that's what
like, are you gonna check me out now too?
right, yeah, yeah. And so we were all like kind of like laughing about it and stuff, but I thought it's stuff like that that happens out of nowhere that you can't even explain, that it feels like the universe is like, "You know what? We've hit this person with enough shit. Let's give something lighthearted in there to break up the chaos that is 911."
It's like I remember specifically, we had this woman that would call all the time from a
Mhm.
911 only phone, at my old agency, and it was just back-to-back calls all day, and then all of a sudden I answer the phone, and it's, "You stupid bitch, go suck a slimy green donkey cock," and I just kinda sit there and I'm like, "Do you need police, fire, or medics? Fuck you!" Click. I was like, okay, I needed that minute to just breathe."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Did she real?" Yep, she did. I will never forget that phone call. And if I need a good laugh, I always bust that out. And if I'm really mad at somebody, I might use the same insult. Uh, and
Oh,
I've been
man.
asked, "Where did you get that one from?" And I was like, "Well, I heard that one on a 911 line once, and I just felt it was really good."
Holy cow. That is a new one. Yes. Holy yeah, I remember, um I'll say this really quick, and because I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask you about how,
Go
your
for it.
first phone calls and stuff, but I remember one time taking a BOL, and for those in general public who are watching and listening to this right now, BOL is a be on the lookout. However, depending on what area of the United States you are, it's either a BOL or a BOLO, a BOLO. It
Solo. Yep.
depends. Yeah, it depends on where you're at. It's different in every place, but it means the same thing. Be on the lookout.
Hmm.
And I remember I'm asking this lady questions, and she goes, "Oh my god, all of these questions. Are you stupid or something? Are you dumb that you have to keep asking me this?" And without skipping a beat, I went, "Aw, that was uncalled for." and and she goes, "Oh." And I said, "It's okay. Continue." And she was like, "Well, I'm really sorry." And I was like, "Ma'am, it's fine."
At
But I
least you
was
got an
being funny about it.
apology.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I at least got an apology, but I was trying to be funny about it. But yeah, I went, "Aw, that's uncalled for."
I need to remember that next time. I
Uh,
had one the other night where the guy asked me, he was just rambling. And I was like, "So do you need police, fire, or medics?" And he was like, "I need to know, what is your education level?" I said, "Sir, I don't have to answer personal questions. If you don't need police, fire, medics, I'm going to hang up now." And everyone in the room was just like, "What just happened?"
right. Yeah, like, "Huh?" Yeah.
I was like, "You don't need to know my education level."
Oh, man. Yeah, there's completely interesting, the amount of stuff that happens, or the types of people that you speak to, or
Yep.
the way they treat you over the phone, and you have to do it with a smile. You have to be professional, and you just have to continue doing what you're doing, because all of those lines are recorded, and
Yep.
you're going to end up on the news. Possibly, possibly you'll end up on the news. So it's
That's my biggest fear.
yeah, dude. I
Biggest.
was I was the same way for sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Um so do you remember like your first phone call that you took, or some of the earlier ones that you took early on in your career?
I don't remember the very first phone call.
Mhm.
One of the first, was actually, I was discussing this with my former trainer last night because it was an absolute off the wall thing. Um, I received the very first phone call for a tanker rollover and explosion on the interstate in our city. The very
What?
first phone call. And it was literally, I think, my first or second day. To the
Oh,
point my
jeez.
trainer, because as a new call taker, I'm like, what? I froze. What else was I gonna do? I
Right.
my trainer literally pushed my chair out of the way and took over that call and the hundreds of calls following, because I was just like, what do I do with this? I mean, it was a tanker explosion that involved two interstates in my city.
Dude.
And I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, cause
Right, because when you first get on phones, like, even if it's a non-emergency, what people don't understand that non-emergency lines, there are a lot of times that people will call in on a non-emergency line and
it's
say.
not an emergency, but
Right, yeah, or, I remember, being in training and they're like, "You're just gonna do non-emergency calls, you'll be fine." I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "Elegant Central Dispatch, this is Ricardo," and the person goes, they wanna harm themselves or something like that, and the trainer's
mhm.
listening too, and they're like. I'm like, "I gotta
You're like,
continue doing this." Yeah,
right. I
but
can't just transfer this call.
yeah, exactly, but, also, if it's like your 1st or 2nd day, you have learned all kinds of policies, procedures, there's a lot of
Right.
stuff. However, you haven't been on phones long enough to be able to implement a lot of those. So
Uh-huh.
it's in your head, but you're mostly looking for those certain things while you're doing it until you've done it enough where it's memorization, right? You've got it
Yeah.
memorized. But something like that, dude, I can't imagine taking that call of this tanker rollover and explosion. You're like, okay, I know I've read this policy, but this is
Right.
like one of the first calls. So,
Right. It's like, I literally just like I remember her going, "Move," and literally pushing my rolling chair out of the way, and her just kind of taking over while I sat there like I just fucked up.
oh man.
And it was like I just beat myself up for weeks afterwards. I was like, I should have been able to do that. But then like looking back now and I'm like, I couldn't have been expected to just jump right in and be like, "Yeah, I got this." Like, what
Right.
dispatcher would do that on their first or second day?
I mean, I'm
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
that's pretty
Uh,
gnarly.
2 times my trainer had to push me out of the way. The second one was a motorcycle accident, where the guy was not wearing a helmet, and it was just
Oh,
one of those. My father had been in a motorcycle accident when I was younger, and it was one of those. All I could think of was my dad, and I don't think people realize when they're calling 911, like they know, hey, I'm talking to a person, but
yeah,
they don't realize they're talking to a person who has life experiences, who has those like emotional moments. So when I hear motorcycle accident, like my first thought is to my dad. I've quickly moved past like, okay, it's time we got to keep going with this. Like somebody's
right.
life is on the line. But my first instinct at that point was to freeze. And she and I kind of had to talk about that afterwards. She was like, "So why did you freeze after that?" And I was like, "Because my dad was in a serious motorcycle accident when I was younger and almost died. Like this it hit way too close to home."
Right, yeah. You know, I
So,
I feel like though in situations like that, and it's not like this all the time. However, and I it might have been different too if you had been there already working for a few years, and you've got,
mhm,
everything there where, you know, you're doing what you're doing, right? You love what you're doing. The confidence is there. You're still kind of thinking like, do I go this way or do this or whichever?
right.
But I feel like it takes about 2.5, maybe 3 years sometimes to really feel like you've dialed everything in. But also in the same sense, I'm a firm believer that there are certain phone calls that are meant for us. I
Yes.
can't explain it, but there's something, and this is, also comparing to what you're telling me as well. There are things in our life experience that
Mhm.
allow us to speak to somebody who's going through a similar situation, that we're able to help them a lot better than anybody else because of that experience that you have.
Yeah. And it kind of adds a personal note to things,
Hmm.
which I know we try and kind of separate personally on a lot of our calls because we do become invested in them in some way.
Right.
Whether it be like just wanting to have an idea of the outcome or but you kind of become invested in them. And that was one of those I was kind of like, this one's gonna stick with me because
Mhm.
it was my first motorcycle accident call and it was my first thought was to my father.
Wow.
And it's like I never really thought about I literally never thought about the side of that accident of the first responders because my dad does not remember the accident. He doesn't remember days before the accident, but I know about the people who showed up on scene to help. In like there was a couple that rolled up on it and called for help, but I never really thought about okay, who took that phone call? Who lifelined him? Who saved his life? Until I took this job. And it wasn't even until I took that phone call that I was like, I wonder if that dispatcher still thinks about that phone call.
Wow. Yeah. No, definitely. You're right on the money there. Jeez. It gets deep, right?
I'm just going to punch it straight home and just like get right in the field.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
you are definitely correct because, I kind of think about, like, just the way you're saying oh, damn, I got goosebumps right now just kinda thinking about it, but when I was growing up, we had my dad was in, Texas, and he was with his siblings. They were out there because, his mom, their mom was really sick, and they weren't sure if she was gonna make it, so they were all out there to help out. So then it's just my siblings and I, our mom and our grandmother, and it's around Christmas time, and one of the nights that we come home, our house had been broken into. So we stayed out of the house for a couple of weeks. An uncle of mine ended up putting some deadbolts, and really secured everything so that, hopefully, something like that wouldn't happen again. Well, the
right,
first night that we're there, that we stayed the night there, we all slept in my grandmother's room because nobody wanted to sleep in their own rooms because we were freaked out, man. Like, what if something happened again?
right,
Well, I wake up in the middle of the night and I hear my mom talking and I hear a man's voice that I have no idea who it is. And I just kind of I peek out a little bit and it was a deputy. And they're talking. He ends up leaving and my mom is just shook. And I go out there and I said, "What happened?" And I said, "Why was the police here?" And she goes, "Somebody tried to break in." And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah." She goes, "I heard somebody by the sliding door on the side of the house." So when she went into the living room by the sliding door, she could see like the silhouette of the person and they were yanking, trying to pull on it. But we had
whew,
a broom handle that was there where they would, unless they broke that glass, there was no way they were going to get in.
right,
And my mom was telling me that, she called 911 and she was yelling at the person, "You need to leave. I called the cops. You need to leave." And they were still trying to open the door. And you saying that makes me think I was probably working with the dispatcher who who took that call
yeah.
because there were folks that were there when I started there that were working around that time. And I never thought to look into who exactly it was, but man, it's something to think about.
I've thought about it. Unfortunately, my dad's accident occurred in another state.
Mhm.
So it was one of those like my mom and grandmother had to travel to go, be with him in the hospital.
Yeah.
But like looking back on it, like if I ever have the opportunity to, just to say thank you because working in this industry, I understand how much work went into locating him and getting help to him because it was on the Blue Ridge Parkway. It was, out in the middle of nature.
Mhm.
Honestly, if this couple hadn't rolled up with a satellite cell phone, which was rare at the time,
Yeah.
then and the fact that he was a volunteer firefighter and paramedic had not everything lined up perfectly, my dad wouldn't be here to this day. He wouldn't be here to enjoy his grandkids.
Wow.
And like we've vacationed with the couple and their family that rolled up and saved his life. Like, we've gone out to their home, they've been to our home. They're an extended family now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's something right there. I don't know that I've heard that. Like, this is gonna be episode 400 something. And that's interesting. But I mean, that's really cool that, you have that connection because not a lot of people get to have a connection like that. It's the same way with, when you're taking a phone call and, you help someone deliver a baby or,
Mhm.
somebody was having a cardiac issue and you're able to help them and you end up meeting them later on. Those are rare occurrences, but also ones that when they happen, they stick with you. Those are the good
So
ones that you want to have stick with you.
this
Yeah.
one right behind me,
Yes.
this is a picture. I got to meet one of my child callers because she won an award with Nina, for calling in and saving her mother's life.
Oh,
So
that
that
is
is one of
amazing.
the pinnacle moments of my career.
I can't even
So
imagine, the feeling, but also like you said right there, you got to meet them and you got
mhm.
this 911 Hero Award and this was 2018 you said?
Yeah,
So,
yep, 2018.
if you don't mind, if it's okay, kind of take me through that. How did what exactly happened?
So I answered a call and it was, I want to say it was like around like 8 or 9 in the evening. It wasn't too
Mhm.
far into shift, but it was dark out. And I received a call from this little girl. And I could tell I was on speakerphone and I was like, 911, what's the location of your emergency? She was like, my mom passed out behind the wheel. And I was like, okay, do you know where you're at? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay, what do you see around you? Because I'm looking at her phone ping, and we all know how, sometimes those can be super reliable. Sometimes, most of the time, they are not. And it was a wide radius. So I was like, I need to kind of narrow down. And where she's pinging is showing a lot of businesses. So if I can narrow down from there, well, I can at least get to the area. And I was, asking her the questions and I was like, okay, what do you see around you? She was like, I see Walmart, I see Popeyes. I was like, okay, I know where you're at. So I immediately started medical, fire. And I was like, okay, tell me what happened. She was like, my mom pulled over and she just passed out. I'm holding her head off the steering wheel so the horn would stop. I'm like, okay, can you tell
Oh,
me what
man.
kind of car you're in? And she was like, she gave me the description down to flames on the side. I was like, that's, you can't miss flames on the side, okay?
Right.
Even in the dark.
Yeah.
And I mean, she was calm, cool, and collected through the entire phone call. And it was one of those, I've never gotten better information from a caller than I did this little girl who was like 8 or 9 at the time. And, I was like, okay, honey, I have help on the way. Is your mom breathing? Like, just trying to get further information while trying to keep her calm. And where she had described, there's the main US highway, and then there's like a side road in between some of those businesses. So I was trying to narrow down, are you on the busy, busy street or are you on like the road in between the businesses? Because you kind of have to make things understandable for a kid,
Mhm.
especially one who's like focusing, okay, I know something's wrong with my mom. And so I was just like, okay, can you kind of describe? And the way she described it, I thought she was on the side road. She at one point said they passed me. I said, okay. I had tried to get her to turn on the flashing hazard lights, described where to look for them, which was my career in rental cars, helped out there because I'm pretty good at finding those things. And she was just like, they're pulling up. I'm gonna jump out and flag them down. I was like, no, 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 no. Stay in the car because I don't know what street you're on, but if they're flying down a road and it's dark, I didn't want her to get hit. I was
Right.
like,
Yeah.
stay with your mom. They're going to come to you, and I'm not hanging up until someone is with you. And in 2018 for the NINA conference, there were 5 calls nominated, or the top 5 calls, I guess I should say, that were nominated for the Child Hero Award. 4 of them came from my agency, and my caller was the winner.
Oh, wow.
So I had the opportunity to meet her. I got a picture with my coworkers that were nominated, a picture with her and her family. And so I was just like, I have to make sure that I frame this because this is something that is kind of a once in a lifetime experience. Like, how
Yeah,
often do we get to meet the person on the other side? And
exactly.
I've actually had the opportunity to meet her twice. I was reached out to by her mother on Facebook, and she was like, "Hey, we were wanting to do kind of a like a presentation for show and tell for her. She was going to take her award to school and do a presentation for her show and tell." And I was like, "Say no more." Like, I went to the florist shop. I got like red or yellow roses. I had them wrapped with a thin gold line, and I showed up. They ended up having a news crew there and everything. I was not prepared for that.
Oh, wow.
But I was there. I got to, show off her award with her. I got to answer questions from her class about when to call 911, what to do if you have to call 911. And it was amazing.
Damn. Well done. That is, like you said, those are rare moments,
Yeah.
and it's captured, and you got to live all of that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Well done. Congratulations. That
I
is
do what I
awesome.
can.
Yeah. You're like, no, that is awesome, man. Oh God, I love hearing stories like that. That is great. Now you also got a lifesaver award, right?
Yeah, that's this one back here.
Mhm.
I've received a few in my career. This was my very first one, and it was a 2-month-old baby boy that stopped breathing in the middle of the night. Um, it was one of those another that tugged at my heartstrings. At the time, I had a 3-month-old niece, and I actually happened to be looking at a picture of her while walking the parents through CPR compression countdown.
Oh
And
man.
it was one of those calls. I was sitting there, like, holding my breath, like praying that someone would get on scene because it was out in the middle of nowhere. So of course we dispatched, fire medical, but we also dispatched the officers that were hopefully closer. And we actually got breath back, and I heard the baby cry just as the officer was marking on scene. And he even wrote like a letter to the sheriff and was like, "Hey, I want to send, this up the chain as an accommodation for the dispatcher. She did an amazing job." Just hearing her voice on the other end of the phone helped calm me down. And I was like, well, that's always kind of nice to hear because, you don't think about, hey, we're also helping the officers in situations like that.
Right.
And I was recently discussing that with another friend of mine who's been an officer at both agencies that I've worked for. And he was like, yeah, hearing you guys on the phone, like, if you guys stay on the phone, I'm going to use you to help me with CPR. Like, please stay on the phone if I'm ever in that situation. I was
Damn.
like, okay, I'm there for that.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Wow.
because usually we're like, okay, they're on scene, I'm done. But
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
over it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, because there's other calls that are coming in as well.
Yeah.
But if they have that that request, then I mean, you're
Hmm.
there. You're there
Yeah.
to help them. You're there to back them up. That is amazing. So we've gone through all of this. I mean, you've
Hmm.
had an amazing career, this experience. I do have a question though, and maybe it's something that you felt early on, but was there a certain call or an incident or something that happened that you had that moment where you thought, I'm where I'm supposed to be? Like, I made the right choice. Like, did you ever have a moment like that?
Yeah. I've had a few calls where it's kind of like, okay, this is what I'm meant to do.
Mhm.
Some of them turned out really good, some of them did not. And I feel like that balance, some people would be like, I wish there were more of the good ones, but I feel like there has to be a balance to it.
Mhm.
We're not always going to have great outcomes, which is unfortunate. I wish we could save everybody, but we can't. But one of the calls that really stuck with me that it really kind of pushed the fact that I am where I'm supposed to be was a 13-year-old girl who called in on 911. I could tell she was trying to console her younger sisters, but mom had just shot herself in the head in the bathroom. Uh, and it's one of those calls that like haunts me.
Mhm.
Mom had locked herself in the bathroom as dad pulled up. Dad walked in, gunshot went off. Dad was too preoccupied to think about, I need to make sure my girls are okay. It's, I have this 13-year-old whose focus was, I need to get help here and I need to make sure my sisters are okay. And I can honestly tell you, if I had to pick one caller in my career that would be perfect at this job, it would be her.
Wow.
And I don't even remember her name. And I wish that I could. I'm horrible with names. I wish that I could remember her name. I wish that I could reach out to her and just be like, you stick with me. But that was one of those calls because I was able to comfort her in one of, if not the most horrible moment of her life. And, I expressed when I first met you, like, I have this call and I hold a lot of anger over that call for her. But when it comes down to it, that call definitely helped solidify. You're here for a reason. If you don't save the life, you can be a comfort for those that are still behind. And that's kind of where I try and be. If I'm talking to an elderly person that's on the phone whose loved one just passed in their sleep, the least that I can do is just be like, okay, you're doing everything you can. We're going to help you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm here. And that's all that I can do.
Man.
So.
Oof. You gave me goosebumps again. But you're right, man. I mean, there's a connection that we end up building with all of these callers. And I mean, just the fact that people call in and are trusting a voice, right? But also when you think about it a little deeper, you think about how your voice alone can change the way a call goes. So what I mean is, if somebody calls in and your voice sounds annoyed, you don't even have to be trying, it can just sound like that or whatever. That might be the first time somebody calls in and it might be the last.
Yeah.
Because and they might not give you the information that you want because of your tone of voice. It's the craziest thing when it's just your voice, but also when you have calls like that and that impact that you end up having, it's nothing like it.
No, there's nothing. And, one of my coworkers at my old agency had made a point after a rough call for me, because the very first time, I took this phone call, because I've had 2 in my career, she looked at me and she was like, you did everything that they needed you to do. They just needed you to do your job. And sometimes that job is just sending someone to find them. Sometimes that job is to talk them down. But you have to figure out in that moment which one it is. And you have split seconds to figure it out.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that's the hardest for us, especially because we don't always get that closure, right? And when you do, that is the main thing, is to know that you did everything that you could. Otherwise, it haunts you.
Yes. So, like, the first of the 2 calls, it still haunts me, because it's like, I still think about, was there something I should have said or done differently? The second call was almost exactly the same, but I had a new trainee who was observing me while they were still in the classroom portion. And I remember hanging up that call and moving on to the next one. And she looked at me and she's like, how can you move on from a call like that? And I said, because I did everything that they wanted me to do. I sent the appropriate help that they wanted. It may not be the help that you think, is going to save their life, because it sure wasn't. And she was like, I just don't know how you could move on from that. And she stood up and went on break and never came back.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, I just have to remember that not everybody that calls 911 is asking you to save their life.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just asking you to protect their loved ones.
Exactly. Wow. That is Jeez. Yeah, and for those, listening, to this is real life.
Mhm.
This is what it's like on one end and then our end as we're taking those calls.
Yeah.
Man, it has been amazing to have you on and share your story, share your insight. And I have one last question for you as we go into the wrap up of this episode.
Okay.
If you could go back in time with the knowledge that you have now to talk to yourself in the beginning, what advice would you give yourself?
Calm down and trust yourself. Trust your gut. It's more accurate than you think. Uh, you second guess a lot in the beginning. I still second guess a lot now, but if I look back, following my gut instinct has never led me wrong. So,
Perfect. Awesome. Damn. Oh, this has been such a good episode. Thank you so much for being on,
you're very
and
welcome.
thank you for the job that you do. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I will be right back here with you in just one moment. For those who are watching and listening right now, if you have any comments, questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/within the trenches podcast. This episode has been sponsored by In Digital, a leader next gen core services. And if you want to become a subscriber of the podcast and help support us, you can check us out, become a subscriber on Facebook. That is facebook.com/within the trenches podcast/support. There's bonus content, discussions, all types of things that are going on there in the private group that we have for Facebook subscribers, but also on Patreon. If you'd rather be a patron of the podcast, patrons have like 7 different tiers of like different swag, discounts, all different types of stuff that you can get there. Facebook subscribers is kind of like the Patreon Lite, if you will. Either way, both of them have awesome content and a bunch of good stuff that goes to it. So if you want to be a patron of the podcast, you can hook us up, and that is patreon.com/WTT podcast. And I thank you all so very much for that. This can be seen on YouTube, Twitter, as well as Facebook and LinkedIn Live. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. We'll see you in the next one.